Hello, people. I'm Karen. I used to enjoy my life during all 24 years of it, but one day I felt that I had lost myself, or rather that somebody had been trying to steal me from myself. Everything started from quite a strange succession of events. One night I was at a show at one of the art galleries in our city that my friends and I usually attended, and suddenly I noticed a guy who was waving at me from the other end of the hall. Even though he was really cute, I didn't recognize him at all, while he seemed to know me well. He came up and made an attempt to kiss me on my cheek. It was definitely inappropriate, so I leaned backward and unfortunately, I did it too sharply. The waiter who was passing by at that moment dropped his tray and doused my whole dress with champagne. Can you imagine? Everybody around was looking at me. I had to leave that place immediately, and I was completely embarrassed. Then, a few days after the accident, I had just finished jogging in a park and bent to stretch my muscles, with my booty up. And suddenly, somebody came up to me and grabbed my ass. I straightened up and saw some unfamiliar guy with a huge smile on his face. I slapped him in the face and called for help, but he immediately ran off. He just ultimately told me that the night before I wasn't so conservative. I could have sworn that I'd spent that night at the movies, and he definitely wasn't with me. And about a week later, I started developing a feeling that everybody around was trying to gaslight me. My parents were in the city, and we decided to go to the opera, where we met my dad's business partner and his wife. Of course, we went up to say hello to them. And then Mr. Jefferson began to ask my opinion about the charity concert, which assumingly he and I attended earlier that month. That made my eyes pop out. I tried to convince everybody that Mr. Jefferson must have been mistaken, but he kept insisting that he not only saw me there, but we even had a small chat. He even, as if jokingly, stressed the point that maybe I shouldn't drink that much the next time. Jesus! Even my head began to ache terribly from all this nonsense. Of course, all of these coincidences bugged me. That's why at home, I began looking through photos from that concert that my dad's partner was talking about. And indeed, in one of them, I saw me. I couldn't believe my eyes. Of course, I couldn't just leave it like that, so I hired a private detective. I don't know exactly what he did or how, but he worked for a week and cost me a small fortune. And then he gave me a bunch of photographs of a girl who looked just like me. Her name was Rita, and she worked as a waitress in a bar located in the opposite part of the city. She definitely wasn't a relative of mine or anything. Now that I knew where to find my look-alike, I needed to understand why she was trying to steal my life. But this time I decided to be a detective myself, or rather to pretend to be a special undercover agent. I put on the most inconspicuous clothes, changed my appearance a bit with a wig and glasses, and found the most hidden table in a bar to be able to watch my clone. I can't explain to you how extremely strange I felt. I guess it was like looking in the mirror to find out that your image was doing whatever it wanted. I read a lot on the internet about doppelgangers, and I'm certainly not the only one in the world who has encountered this. But there was no instructions on how to behave when this happens. And while I was sitting and thinking about what I was going to do, some guy came up to me to take my order. I looked at him and I was just stupefied. It was like how they show in movies, the whole love at first sight. I had never felt like that before. He took my order and left, while I kept imagining how we had gotten married and had 3 kids and how perfect our life was. Since that moment, I was watching him and not that Rita girl. I discovered that he was the owner of that bar and that his name was Preston. Ah, the perfect name for a perfect guy. While I was fantasizing, I missed the moment when Rita finished her shift and left, so I had to quickly get up to follow her. I caught up to her halfway next to the convenience store. When I touched her shoulder to make her stop, she almost jumped out of her skin. I pulled off my wig and glasses. Her eyes widened and she began to open and close her mouth, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. To me, she looked like a fish that had been washed ashore. And then she suddenly ran into the store, as if trying to hide from me. I didn't expect this kind of reaction, but I couldn't lose her, so I also rushed in there. Rita began to hide behind the shelves from me, yelling that I had to leave her alone, while I kept yelling at her that she needed to calm down so we could talk. She began throwing various goods at me, while the cashier was standing behind the market stall in complete bewilderment. Yep, maybe for everybody else, a scene where two completely identical girls are arguing with each other so heatedly might seem stunning. Then, suddenly, something really heavy hit my head, so hard that I fell down on the floor, and I immediately felt the huge knot that appeared on my head. It turned out that Rita threw a San Pellegrino can at me. That same second, I saw her rushing out from that store. I had to pay that sales guy for the damages that we had caused, and then I went to Rita's house. I knew the address from my detective. It didn't surprise me when I knocked on the door and nobody opened it. But when I saw her shadow under the door, I couldn't come up with anything better than to scare her, promising to hand her over to the police for trying to steal my identity. That worked, and she let me into her apartment. The place was very small, and I could tell that she was poor. But when I looked around a bit, I noticed several really expensive dresses laying on a couch. Those must have been the ones she was wearing while pretending to be me. I saw that she was nervous and scared. But all I wanted was an explanation. Rita's story was as simple as it could be. She once saw my photograph in a newspaper in a column about my dad, and she got surprised about how extremely similar our appearances were. She found me on Instagram to get to know me better. And then one day she got the idea to try to use our resemblance to get into a special event, and at least once in her lifetime, try herself out in the role of a socialite. If she got caught or saw me there, she'd pretend that she just wanted to get to know me. But since that time everything worked out, she decided to try again and again and again. Once she even stole my mail to get an invitation. She told nobody about her plan and spent all her savings on chic outfits. She was planning on stopping this little charade once she found a nice and wealthy boyfriend. I took a deep breath. Deep inside, I felt sorry for her. But at the same time, I couldn't let her keep using my reputation. What if she screws up really bad one day? That's why I threatened that if this happens again, even once, then I would definitely go to the police. I was about to leave when she suddenly knelt in front of me and began to beg me to allow her to be me one last time. It turned out that she had already fallen in love with one guy who she knew was going to be at an upcoming event the next weekend. Rita swore that she would tell him the whole truth there, but she just needed that chance to be able to talk to him. That made me think. I thought about that guy, the owner at the bar. Now I could completely understand her feelings. What can I say? I have always been a pretty charitable person, so I agreed. Moreover, Rita kind of inspired me. So when the next Saturday she went to that event, I also decided to not miss my chance to be happy and went to that bar again to talk to Preston. But this time, no conspiracy, just me as I am. The place was really crowded and it was obvious that all of the staff were overloaded with work. I found myself an empty chair at the bar and began to wait when I saw Preston. But even before I had enough time to sit down, somebody grabbed my hand and started pulling me toward the kitchen, saying that they were so happy that I wasn't too sick to work. It was him. I tried to explain that I wanted to talk to him, but he just kept telling me something about the tables and the orders. And it was only when he handed me an apron and a tray that I realized that he had me confused with Rita, who apparently said that she wasn't feeling well in order to skip her shift. There was such a fuss and a hustle and bustle in the kitchen, and orders began to pour at me from all sides, and even Preston himself was running from table to table. I realized that if I left now, I'd let him down, and I really wanted to help him. I had nothing else to do but to pretend that I was Rita, while somewhere else she was pretending to be me. At first, I mixed up a few orders, and in an hour or so I was already feeling beat. But I never gave up. So by the end of that crazy night, I'd become a professional waitress. I felt so satisfied and pleased when Preston praised me for my work. And when everybody else had finally left to go home, he asked what it was that I wanted to talk to him about. I said that I wasn't Rita and handed him my driver's license. He stared at it, then he looked at me and started apologizing so profusely for his mistake that I even felt awkward myself. He said that he'd give me and my friends a lifetime discount at his bar, and he said that I could ask him for anything in return for my forgiveness. I smiled at him and I asked him out. That night, both Rita and I told our men the truth about a situation. We are now all friends, and I bet hardly any of you can brag about a more unusual dating story.